I Hate the News is the weekly news bulletin from I Hate Politics podcast, a show about a human activity we love to hate. I'm Sunil Dasgupta. It's November 4th, 2025. The cities of Gaithersburg and College Park vote today. If you live in those towns, be sure to vote. Same-day registration is available. Voter turnout for local elections tends to be abysmal, and you can make a difference just by voting. The Trump administration says it will fund $4.65 billion in SNAP benefits, half of November's estimated payments. But with delays and the contingency funds will run out after that. After several days of weighing the issue, Maryland Governor Wes Moore finally approved $62 million in state funds to make up for the other half for this month alone. If the federal shutdown does not end in November, the politics of SNAP will return. The start of the state's legislative prep season began last week with Maryland transportation officials visiting Montgomery County as part of their listening tour. But one particular conversation with District 16 delegate Mark Corman was revealing for how government works. MCPS is trying to convince families and schools that their program changes are desirable and feasible, but faces resistance from the community. In Prince George's County, the planning board cannot officially meet because it lacks quorum. County Executive Aisha Braveboy has not appointed board members. How does this happen? And more, stay with us.
I Hate Politics is brought to you by the Political Science Program at UMBC Shady Grove, where you'll learn a strong foundation in public policy, pre-law, and international affairs for an impactful career in a number of essential areas. Learn more at shadygrove.umbc.edu.
What's with you today? What's with today? Gotta tell her I love her.
I Hate Politics is a podcast about our neighborhoods, workplaces, schools and streets, and our local governments as they function in diverse and democratic societies. This means our politics are messy, dirty, sometimes corrupt, with often self-serving politicians. But no matter how much we may hate politics, we are never exempt from it, even when we refuse to participate. In fact, the purpose of politics is to keep society functioning, precisely when we don't agree with each other, like now. Music for this episode comes from Dear Daria, a Washington, D.C. power pop indie rock band. Mary Jo Matea on vocals, guitar, and keys. Joshua Hunter on guitar. Eamon Donnelly on bass, and Dan ABH on drums. You can find their music at deardariaband.com.
Damn the man who saved the empire. Damn the man who saved the empire. Damn the man who saved the empire. Damn the man who saved the empire.
The federal shutdown and SNAP politics continue. A federal judge in Rhode Island had ordered the Trump administration to use contingency funds to make SNAP payments. The Trump administration has agreed to use $4.65 billion in contingency funds, but that will only meet half the payments for November, and the administration says payments will be delayed regardless. Meanwhile, states are scrambling to make payments. Louisiana has appropriated $150 million. New Mexico, $30 million. Virginia has said that it will backfill the gap week by week for the month of November. In Maryland, where residents receive $123 million each month in SNAP benefits, Governor Wes Moore has finally, on Monday, November 3rd, allocated $62 million to meet the half of benefits the federal government will not pay. For several days now, State legislative leaders have been trying to persuade the governor to declare a state of emergency, which would allow him to withdraw money from the state's rainy day fund. Moore did declare emergency and promised 10 million for food banks, but resisted backfilling SNAP payments and certainly reaching into the rainy day fund. He is still not using the rainy day fund, but the fiscal responsibility fund, which collects windfall taxes. Last week, at the joint meeting of the State House Appropriations Committee and the State Senate Budget and Taxation Committee, discussions revealed division within state government over the next steps, and these discussions could very well come back again at the end of November if the federal shutdown does not end by then. Here is Appropriations Committee Chair Ben Marnes.
But we're not in Congress. We can't control the President of the United States. We can't bring him to the table to negotiate health care and to make him use contingency funds to pay for SNAP benefits. But we can solve what we can solve in Maryland. And here in Maryland, our fiscal house is in order. We balanced our budget this year. We ended fiscal 25 in a surplus, and we have a robust rainy day fund. And I know that DHS will seek reimbursement of these funds once a deal is reached. But even if they aren't able to recoup these funds, I know that we have the money in the rainy day fund to cover this program, at least in the short term. And I think we should be clear that we understand the rainy day fund cannot cover this program into perpetuity. So we're here today to explore if there are ways to extend the benefit. And I want to be crystal clear. This committee, this House, and this Speaker believes that we should extend this benefit on a monthly basis for the month of November and potentially into December to get us through the holidays.
Speaking on behalf of the Moore-Miller administration was Jake Wiseman, the newly appointed acting secretary in the Department of Budget and Management.
The state does have the funds to backfill SNAP funding, but I want to provide you with a larger picture. We're in month 10 of a 4-year term, and we are going to continue to face these kinds of challenges for the next 3 years. I think it's important to remember that this is a shutdown over what is now a 3-week continuing resolution. This is not the only shutdown we could face before the new year, and it's very likely only a sign of things. And this isn't like any other shutdown. There are no reimbursement guarantees, and we seem to have federal courts that are unwilling to check the White House's fiscal. The conversations we're having within the Moore-Miller administration are broader than SNAP. The Low-Income Home Energy Assistance Program, or LIHEAP, is close to running out. WIC may be in danger. There are growing questions about Head Start, and there are real valid concerns as to whether this administration threatens Medicaid funding sometime in the future. That's not to mention the impact of continued federal actions on our state's economy. And as a state, we are continuing to help folks navigate this crisis, including funding for state employees who are paid with federal dollars. So far, we've spent about $30 million for salary and fringe benefits with no guarantee of reimbursement. Almost 1/3 of these positions are in Department of Human Services, and about 10 to 15% each in MSDE, Department of Health, and Department of Labor. While we maintain slightly under 8.5% in the rainy day funds, we're also facing over $1 billion shortfall next year. With all the outstanding questions, we have to move carefully to protect Maryland.
Back to Appropriations Chair Barnes.
Yeah, Mr. Weissman. So look, we've heard a lot from you and Mr. Baker about the shortcomings of the federal government. You will get no argument, I don't think, from many of us on these committees with regard to that. But that doesn't alleviate us of our responsibilities to step in.
Governor Moore's Chief Legislative Officer, Jeremy Baker, steps in at this point, and Chair Barnes responds.
It'll be in keeping, Mr. Chair, with what we've seen other states and localities around our state too.
States like Virginia who have said that they're going to cover this benefit?
I think we continue to work through how we'll address the SNAP shortfall.
Jake, you've talked a lot about other emergencies or things that could come down the pike. And I think that we all understand the dangers that the Trump administration presents to our state and nation. We're not oblivious to that at all. But we have rainy day funds now. So you've said, we might have WIC or energy assistance issues coming up. Do you believe those programs to be more valid? Are we saving money for that? Are we, what? To me, there's nothing more valid than the emergency in front of our nose, and that's the catastrophe of people going to the store Saturday morning, expecting money on their benefits card and finding out they're not. So could you get into that a little bit? If we're saving the money and we're not going to use the rainy day fund, what are we saving it for? What's the better use? Can you elaborate on that a little?
Yeah, we are exploring both what we have and also the technical means and a variety of different sources. It's not a matter of one need is more urgent or more important than the next. It's a matter of approaching this from a week by week iterative standpoint, right? We want to make sure that we are approaching this and saying, what are the needs in front of us and how do we address them while not committing the state to future liabilities down.
Look, you've both been chiefs of staff in the legislature, and I have great affection for both of you. You know that the comments here today are woefully inadequate, and we're not really getting much information, but I guess we'll stay tuned for the next 24 hours. Are there any other questions from the committees? Delegate Greist?
That's Delegate Jeff Greist from District 36, which covers Caroline, Cecil, Kent, and Queen Anne's counties.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just this morning, I got a call from our local Head Start folks. And the position that they are in is that they have money to be able to continue their operations through Head Start. The challenge that they have, though, is that their meal service is paid for with SNAP benefits. The question herein lies that, do they continue to keep their doors open, knowing that they can't feed the kids, or do they shut down at least temporarily and not provide any Head Start programming just because they can't have provide their food service? So that's real. I mean, obviously the deadline is in just a few days. As you all know, on the Appropriations Committee and B&T, this is be my 12th session going in, and the entire time my entire career as a delegate has been on Appropriations Committee, and you all know that I'm very fiscally conservative. But I will say, though, as a fiscal conservative, that the rainy day fund should be used for just that. It should be used in a situation where you are the state's in a bad situation, where we need some money to deal with an emergency situation. And here we are. We're in that situation right now where we need a certain amount of money to fix an emergency situation. And that's what our rainy day fund's for. That's what it's there for. And that's something that I would certainly support using it for. Obviously, we can't sustain this for more than a month or two. And I can't speak for our entire caucus, but I think a lot of our membership in the Republican caucus would also support this short-term measure to ensure that that these benefits are still being paid. Because obviously, these are, oftentimes single working moms, they're folks that have developmental disabilities. These are folks, that are senior citizens and they can't help themselves. That's the majority of the people that take SNAP benefits. And you've heard us say we're concerned about waste, fraud, and abuse. We're, worried about people who say they lost their cards and end up selling them to somebody else and we replace them. But I think that's a small percentage of the people that take this benefit.
Delegate Emily Shetty from District 18 in Montgomery County.
Is the governor reconsidering or open to reconsidering that announcement about the rainy day funds?
Budget Secretary Jake Wiseman.
Delegate, I don't want to say for certain right now and lock the governor into any specific source of funds. Obviously, there are concerns with going into the rainy day fund specifically, right? Senator Young mentioned earlier about bond rating agencies. So there are a variety of concerns, but as Mr. Baker said, we are looking at every available pot of money to figure out where the governor can best help.
Worth noting that 372,000 Maryland families receive SNAP benefits. That's 668,000 people. And it goes to those that make less than 35,000 for a family of three. The average benefit is about 184 per recipient. The max benefit can be 785 for people with absolutely no income. 40% of recipients are less than 18 years old, and 20% are 60 and older. While aggregate SNAP benefits distributed in Prince George's and Montgomery counties are large, the largest recipients of SNAP benefits as a percentage are Baltimore City, Allegheny, Somerset, and Dorchester counties. The Eastern Shore and Mountain Maryland, both largely Republican dominated areas, are much more dependent on SNAP benefits. Consequently, even state Republican leaders supported the use of the Rainy Day Fund for this purpose. The Maryland Rainy Day Fund has $2.2 billion, just over 8% of the general fund revenues. The state has traditionally maintained the Rainy Day Fund at 5% of general fund revenues. The use of the Fiscal Responsibility Fund and the Rainy Day Fund does not make that much of a difference. The state is expected to have a current account deficit this year, which has to be made up regardless from some surplus. The city of Baltimore is putting $1.7 million of its own for food support. Montgomery County is putting in $7 million, but more broadly for food support and for help to federal employees affected by the shutdown. Last week, the Maryland Department of Transportation came to Montgomery County, and city, county, and state representatives joined the conversation. As these things go, there was a lot of mutual admiration, but one conversation between District 16 Delegate Mark Corman, who is also the House of Delegates Environment and Transportation Committee Chair, was particularly insightful on how governments, and particularly transportation departments, tend to work.
I did just want to raise a couple other issues briefly around the manual on uniform traffic control devices. I remember being in this room probably 8 years ago hearing from your predecessors that hawk signals were illegal under the manual and that we could not do improvements like that without violating the manual. And recently, we were told we couldn't paint the box at an intersection that didn't have a traffic light because that was illegal under the manual. We asked why. We said, can we ask Federal Highway about this? Federal Highway is actually closed right now, but State Highway came back and said, actually, we will do the thing, which I appreciate. And I actually was driving this weekend. Yes, I was driving on Connecticut Avenue, and I saw actually this already exists at Connecticut and Chevy Chase Lake. So actually, this happened in other places as well. But it just makes me a little concerned that we're using the manual to say no to things that maybe are actually totally permissible under the manual and done in other places. And the latest example is hidden driveways. We're being told that hidden driveway signs are not allowed under the manual. And I wouldn't recommend a hidden driveway sign on 270 or maybe even River Road. But as you know, what we call state highways, many of them run through very residential areas like Bradley Boulevard. And so I'm just hoping we can look at the manual with the same flexibility and creativity that other jurisdictions seem to look at it and, get back to yes a lot faster rather than just, falling back on the manual to say something.
Maryland Transportation Acting Secretary Samantha Biddle.
Mr. Chair, your comments on MUTCD are well taken and I think are part of the broader culture shift that we're really looking to accomplish in terms of everything that we're looking at in terms of how we deliver safety projects. Certainly, we have those resources there as a guide, but we also have a lot of other tools and professional judgment that we can use when trying to figure out what the best safety solution is for any corridor.
Maryland State Highway Administrator Will Pines.
On the MUTCD, we actually are actively working with Federal Highway to update the manual into the new year. It incorporates a lot of the safety improvements in the pedestrian bicycle safety front that came with the Federal Highway 11th edition. We've been, as Director Conklin mentioned, working hand in glove with them to update our speed policy, to focus a lot more on having speed management policies that will help us to reduce speeds on roadways and protect lives. But there is it's probably, I've talked to at least 5 of you in the room about the MUTCD at different points. In reality, most of the deviations that we've had away from MUTCD, from an engineering standpoint, we technically should not have. but we take a risk in that the manual, it is implied in law that we should be following it in order to retain our federal funds. However, we do work with our federal partners to try to get relief in that whenever possible to work with the city. So my team did make me aware of the hidden driveway issue, and I commit that we will take another look.
The MUTCD is the Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices, which is a Federal Highway Administration document that governs the design of roads. Those of you who are following I Hate Politics coverage of Montgomery County Public Schools' program changes. Last week, MCPS officials held a public meeting on the subject at John F. Kennedy High School, which sits in East County and has a high rate of students eligible for free and reduced meals, which means many families in the school are poor. MCPS was trying to convince the community to buy into their proposals, but found mainly resistance. The audio isn't the best considering it was recorded in a crowded and noisy venue, but you can get a sense of the anxiety in the room.
I'm going to call parents with sixth grader, and thank you for allowing us to have this Q&A of changing up things, but I hope you guys, division leadership, recognizes we need more time for this than 30 minutes or 25 minutes in the future, but I'm all about equity, and I love that you guys are trying to make it more equitable so everyone has access and opportunity. However, I'm finding some inequities in your current plan of what you're protecting for the future. One, looking at the programming, it seems like they're siblings, not twins. So that means that engineering in one region may look different in another region. For instance, I saw in one region engineering MC2 that was not in our region. I saw aviation that was not in our region. If we're talking about equitable programming, why are we not seeing it across division-wide? How are we going to make sure all our students have access to these programs in the future if we're trying to solve inequities? My other inequity that I saw is I'm wondering about the data. I like that you provided the numbers, but did you guys look at the numbers for NCC and DCC at the rate in which students apply to which programs to ensure that there's still enough space when we move to the new regional model? There was a reason why these programs were created in the first place in the areas in which they are in. How do we ensure that we're still addressing this concern with the future program model?
Among the more unusual local stories you will hear is the saga of a government agency unable to fill positions so it could hold meetings. The Prince George's County Planning Board, the agency which approves development projects in Maryland's second largest county, is currently down to 2 out of 5 members. It takes 3 members, or the majority of the board, to constitute quorum. Without quorum, the body cannot hold official meetings, which means all business in front of the Prince George's County Planning Board has now stopped. Planning board members in Prince George's County are appointed by the county executive, at this moment, Aisha Braveboy. Darrell Barnes, once a state legislator, is the current planning board chair and shares the responsibility for the smooth running of the board. It is unclear whether Barnes and Braveboy have communicated about missing planning board members and what it means for the business of the county. Per law, the Prince George's County Planning Board is required to approve or deny site plans for development projects within 70 days of submission, and whether this provision will go into effect depends on how long these seats remain unfilled. There is divided opinion on whether this deemed approval process is all bad, but what it means is that developers might now have to get separate approvals for specific things like stormwater and forest conservation permits.
Stella's a strange and special girl, oblivious
that's all for this episode. Be sure to check out our feature interview series that come out Friday mornings. I Hate Politics is produced by me, Sunil Dasgupta, with support from the University of Maryland, Baltimore County. I direct UMBC's political science program at the universities at Shady Grove in Montgomery County, where, among other things, we explore and learn about politics, government, and society close to home. Music for this episode comes from Dear Daria, a Washington, D.C. power pop indie rock band. Mary Jo Mattea on vocals, guitar, and keys. Joshua Hunter on guitar. Eamon Donnelly on bass. And Dan ABH on drums. You can find their music at deardariaband.com. If you want to share your music on the show or know someone else who might want to, please email us at producer@ihppod.org. I hope you'll subscribe and share the podcast as we bring you stories about politics close to you and to your home. See you next time.